8 years ago, an angry young Brian Zane ranked this week's show as his pick for the third worst WrestleMania of all time. And now after watching it once again, an older, slightly wiser Brian Zane may have to take that back. It's time for WrestleMania 25 from April 5th, 2009 at the Reliance Stadium in Houston, Tejas. This show was nominated by, I hope I'm saying this name right, Tian Sianturi, Ryan Capps, Christian Bullard, Jason Young, Useless Media Inc., and Rocky over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. I tell you what, I had a real interesting time watching all the programming leading up to this show and the show itself. This pay-per-view is 13 years old, and it's really fascinating to see how many people who were on the card and on the product at that time who are still participating or otherwise contributing to wrestling at a very high level today. Count the number of people you see on this show alone. 72,744 people in attendance here, 960,000 buys. Michael Cole, Jim Ross, and Jerry Lawler on commentary. And let's get one thing out of the way right now. The branding for this whole show is the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir a bit when I say this, but that's bullshit. If it was the anniversary show, it would take place on, say, March 31st, when the first WrestleMania took place. It is the 24th anniversary of the first WrestleMania. It is the 25th annual WrestleMania, but not the 25th anniversary. It's a bit of a distinction there. Nicole Scherzinger of the Pussycat Dolls sings America the Beautiful. Then it's time for our Money in the Bank ladder match to kick things off. CM Punk, who is last year's winner, takes on Mark Henry, MVP, Finlay, Shelton Benjamin, Kofi Kingston, Kane, and Christian. Wow, Christian in a multi-man ladder match? Can't say I've seen that lately. Time truly is a flat circle. MVP, by the way, is the new US champion as of a couple of weeks ago. He beat Shelton Benjamin on the 500th episode of SmackDown. Kingston making his WrestleMania debut. And oh my God, can we talk for a second about Finlay's awesome WrestleMania entrance attire here? He comes out with that vest, the shoulder pad reminiscent of the Belfast Bruiser days, and his son Hornswoggle's got a matching gimmick. It's adorable. The match begins. Christian and Shelton bring in the first ladder and start swinging, but Kofi takes them both out. Kane and Mark Henry climb the ladder at the same time, but everyone else brings them down. The smaller guys all pawn at the briefcase until the two heavies take them all down. Christian with a dive, MVP with a dive, Kofi and Punk each dive, then Shelton from the top of the Jeff Hardy-sized ladder. Looks like barely anyone catches him. Holy crap. Mark Henry tees in a dive, but Finlay decks him with a shillelagh. Then Hornswoggle brings in his own ladder, climbs on top of Henry, the tadpole splash onto everyone. Okay, that was a pretty fun sequence. Future stablemates, Shelton and MVP have a cool exchange around the structure. Christian hits Punk with the unprettier off the ladder bridge. Shelton climbing the most illogical ladder construction of all time to catch MVP, goes for a sunset flip powerbomb, but they sadly fucked that up. Hope everyone was okay. Finlay with a pleasant looking bump on the bridge, a beautiful moment where Christian catches himself from falling, bounces back up and the crowd goes nuts. Punk kicks Kane off the top, grabs the briefcase, and wins for the second year in a row. I'm gonna give this one 4 stars out of 5. Okay, I seriously forgot how awesome and entertaining this match was. So many ludicrous moments were jam-packed into this thing. Everyone got to impress. There was a lot of innovation there. Like I said, that whole 3 or 4 ladder structure they had going from the outside of the ring to the inside was super cool. They pulled it off, but it's like, why, in what reality would you set that up and make any kind of logical sense? Even the stuff involving Hornswoggle was pretty entertaining. It's funny because I'm pretty sure Punk did not look kindly upon this moment where he won the briefcase for the second time, because it was a case of them not really knowing what to do with him. But as for Punk, this would benefit him, of course. A few months later, he would cash in the briefcase and beat Jeff Hardy for the world title at the end of Extreme Rules, but that's a story for another time. Then we go right into the Kid Rock concert. Man, why they gotta kill the mood of this show this early? By the way, it turns out they had to actually cut the tag title match here between the Colognes and Miz and Morrison to make room for Kid Rock's very large concert. They had to put it in before the show began officially, so boo this man. The concert is our transition into the 25 Diva Battle Royal to crown the first Miss Wrestlemania. This match features ladies from the past and the present. Who, you ask? Well, since the company couldn't be bothered to tell you, here are the names of everyone involved. Justin Roberts can't even finish his announcement before Layla is taken out. Mae Young and Candice Michelle are shown as timekeepers for all of 2 seconds. Nobody looks more lost in this match than Sunny, who I'm wondering how she even got in this match, considering she was never, to my knowledge, a proper worker. She was a valet, and obviously she spent time in the business, but I don't think she had wrestled a single match up to that point. The announcers are only able to figure figure out who's been eliminated if they no longer see them, because they are sure missing them in real time. Nasty bump for Gail Kim and Jillian Hall as they both go out of the ring, and Gail's mistaken for one of the Bella Twins by Michael Cole. I didn't even know Molly Holly was in this thing until she was thrown out. They finally make reference to the mystery diva, who is very obviously Santino Marella in drag. Mickey James and Michelle McCool take each other out. It's down to Beth, Melina, and obviously Santino. Obviously, Santino eliminates Beth and Melina to win the whole thing, and it turns out it's Santino's sister, Santina Marella. Justin Roberts and Candice Michelle are surprisingly unsuspicious of all this. I'm going to rate this match as the polar opposite of one you will see later on in this show and give this match -5 stars. I mean, what can I say about it? The presentation sucked, as it was just kind of window dressing to the Kid Rock concert. The match itself was really not great. It felt insulting in multiple parts as a viewer, and just kind of feeling bad for the women who took part in this and barely got to be seen or even mentioned by name. And the reason Santino's in this, and the fact that the Santino is the punchline and the payoff to this whole match they spent weeks building up, was because he wanted to be in the Divas Battle Royal despite him not being a diva, so him being in drag was his way into it. What was his motive for wanting to be in the Battle Royal in the first place despite not being a diva? Who knows? But nevertheless, this was the payoff. It kept going at least a month and a half or two pay-per-views after this, feuding with Beth Phoenix and Vicky Guerrero. And I guess, you know, the gimmick was really stupid, but the only positive thing I can say about it is good to Santino for his commitment to the bit. But besides that, not much else redeeming about it. Good for maybe a couple of chuckles, you know, cheap chuckles. That's it. A palate cleanser now. Up next is a handicap elimination match as Chris Jericho takes on the Hall of Fame team of Roddy Piper, Jimmy Snuka, and the new Hall of Famer Ricky Steamboat, and they're accompanied by Ric Flair. This was the angle that was inspired by the critically acclaimed film The Wrestler, which I have talked about at length right here. But here is the gist of this storyline. Chris Jericho hates that movie, hates Mickey Rourke, but most of all, he hates the legends. Jericho's been on a one-man crusade against the elderly. He has savagely beaten up Piper, Steamboat, Snuka, and Flair in consecutive weeks, and says these legends have a sickness and are obsessed with the spotlight. Of course, the original plan was for Jericho and Mickey Rourke, but for reasons I've explained in other videos, that match didn't happen, and so Jericho then calls out the legends and challenges them to a 3-on-1 handicap match to really prove that, you know, old school is in fact not cool. And here's something I forgot from before. They actually use a soundbite from the movie in the hype package.
The only one who's going to tell me when I'm through doing my thing is you people here.
After the package, Mickey Rourke, the man who should have been in the match all along, sits at ringside. Piper strikes first against Jericho as JR says the offense for this match could be bowling shoe ugly for the legends. No kidding. Piper gets caught in the ropes as he and Jericho go over. Back in the ring, Piper hits a drop kick of some sort. Snuka gets in some offense. Then it's Ricky Steamboat's turn, and there are those deep arm drags. Hot damn, that's cool to see after so long. Snuka comes back in with a headbutt, but Jericho puts him in the walls and the Superfly is eliminated. Piper gets Jericho in his sleeper, but Chris fights out of it and hits the enziguri to take out Piper. Steamboat hits a top rope cross body. The two work for a while. The Dragon skins the cat and throws Jericho out, then dives onto him. Steamboat's a house of fire here. He's got Jericho on the ropes a couple of times, even dodges the lion salt and fights out of the walls. Finally, there's a code breaker, and that's all she wrote. Holy shit, what a performance by Steamboat. After the bell, Jericho calling out Flair. He gets in the ring and chops away, but Jericho takes him down with a code breaker. Then Jericho calls out Mickey Rourke at ringside. He says that while Rourke may play a tough guy in movies, he's a tough guy in real life. He wants a piece of the Micker, and Rourke, who only earlier that day discovered what a work was when he finally learned that Jericho didn't really have it out for him, slowly enters the ring. They square off, and Rourke ultimately knocks Jericho down with a left hook, and that's all she wrote. I give this one 3 stars out of 5, and those 3 stars go to Chris Jericho and Ricky Steamboat alone, because they really are the saving graces for this match. I still can't get over how cool it was to see Steamboat come back from that, because it was his first match back since his back injury that put him in retirement in 1994. So for him to come back there, still hit those arm drags like nobody's business and doing the dives and everything, it was really cool to see, and really an unexpected side effect of this match happening, because he would get another pay-per-view match at Backlash the next month, one-on-one against Jericho, which was also pretty badass. But man, I still think a Jericho-Rourke match would have been fun at least. Well, the day before I'm recording this video, Jeff Hardy has just debuted in AEW and is reunited with Matt Hardy, which makes makes this next match feel a little awkward. It's an Extreme Rules match, brother versus brother, as Matt takes on Jeff. At the Royal Rumble, Matt cost Jeff the WWE Championship against Edge when he dinked him in the head with a chair. After weeks and weeks of wondering why, Matt finally explained that he was done holding Jeff's hand through so much in his life and his career, admits that his own career has been mediocre while Jeff's has skyrocketed. He was tired of being overshadowed by him. He wants to fight Jeff, but Jeff doesn't want to fight his brother. Matt talks about all the tragedy that befell Jeff in the last year, losing the championship, being assaulted by his own pyro. Then there was that house fire, which also claimed the life of his dog, which then brought the world the infamous "What about my dog?" line from Matt. So then in that promo, Matt all but claims responsibility for all the bad things that happened to Jeff, both in kayfabe and in real life, which feels really undersold by everyone, like in the weeks leading up to this. Only in this match in the intros does commentary bring up, well, Matt said this. Well, hey, he didn't actually officially admit to burning down Jeff's house, but it's like, come on, either commit to the angle or don't, I say. The whole leaving it ambiguous I thought was a little weird. That being said, people are way more into this Hardy feud than they were the last time I covered them breaking up in 2001. The fight is on, and Jeff's first weapon is a framed picture of a Wrestlemania magazine cover. Off to a hot start, but Matt dodges poetry in motion and blasts Jeff with a chair while he's in midair. This here is the only time I can recall a shop vac ever being used as a weapon in a match. Side effect on the chair. Matt's setting up a table on the outside, but Jeff makes a comeback, starts thwacking away with a kendo stick. Jeff cans his brother and is on the attack. JR brings up the other brother versus brother matches at WrestleMania in history. He brings up, Owen versus Bret and the Undertaker and Kane. And then Michael Cole goes, well, yeah, but were either of those as personal as this one? Like, I don't know, man. The Undertaker killed he and Kane's parents in a fire, so I think more than a dog. Jeff dinks Matt with a chair, drapes him on Chekhov's table outside, but he's got evil intentions. Stacking another table on top of everything, Jeff goes up top and dives, almost overshoots his target, but he's able to splat onto his brother, but Matt gets his foot on the ropes in the pinfall. Jeff brings in some big-ass Jeff Hardy-sized ladders and stands them up next to each other. Jeff with a pointless leapfrog over the taller ladder, and he misses his mark. Matt puts Jeff's head in a chair and hits the twist of fate. Matt wins. I give this one 3.5 stars out of 5. Thought it was a pretty darn good weapons match for what it was. A much better affair than the last Matt versus Jeff match that I covered here, of course, like I mentioned, in 2001. But the circumstances were so much different back then. Like, they hadn't grown apart and they hadn't developed into their own characters like they had by 2009. So I think this was a much better fleshed out story, and as crazy as it was to suggest that Matt Hardy was responsible for all the bad things that happened to Jeff Hardy in the previous year, though. As good as this match was, I know it sets up for an even better I Quit match at Backlash the following month, so if I do get around to covering that show, we'll have that to look forward to. Backstage, Randy Orton's getting ready for his title match later on. He and Ted DiBiase share a knowing look. Then we go to the Intercontinental Championship match as John Bradshaw Layfield returns to his home state to defend against Rey Mysterio. JBL has vowed to do something historic at WrestleMania, the 25th anniversary. He couldn't parlay his way into a championship match when HBK was his servant, because I guess he wanted that Mr. WrestleMania hookup, apparently. He couldn't get a match with The Undertaker, so he did actually end up beating CM Punk for the IC belt a few weeks before this and challenged Rey Mysterio. Jibbles has promised the most dominant victory in WrestleMania history when he fights Mysterio, a guy who on the previous week's Raw on the go-home beat JBL clean in only a matter of minutes. Interesting tactic. I mean, this match in its very nature is historic because it's the first time the Intercontinental title was defended at WrestleMania since number 18. That's a long time. JBL on the mic before the match telling the people of Texas they can be proud of him and look to him as a hero since Texas has no other champions. Rey Mysterio in his first Mania since 21 with the Heath Ledger Joker-inspired attire of this year. JBL jumps Mysterio before the bell rings, then the match begins and the match ends. Rey hits him with the quickness, hits the 619 and the splash to win the IC title in 21 seconds. This wouldn't be his last sub-1 minute title match at a WrestleMania. After the match, JBL on the mic and after much hemming and hawing declares that he quits, and he did. That was his last match. Hell of a way to go out. This one wasn't much of a match, so the rating's not going to count toward the overall score of the show, but I give it 1 star out of 5. Not much of a match, but a heck of a moment for WrestleMania. Then up next, oh man, I forgot the match was this early on the card. It's The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. So after Shawn Michaels earned his freedom from JBL's employment at No Way Out, he was his servant for a while, so he becomes a free man once again, and he wants to challenge The Undertaker Undertaker and defeat him and break his streak at WrestleMania. He feels he's the only man who can do it. He's supremely confident, does not fear the dead man, and in fact, every one-on-one match they've ever had up to this point, Shawn had always won. Then beyond that, the build really goes into this good versus evil, light versus dark kind of thing. Gets a little religious at times, but they're really trying to show there's a dichotomy in these two individuals and how they present themselves and how they conduct themselves. It's pretty obvious here. As for the match itself, I'm not going to try and do a recap or a blow-by-blow retelling of this thing because there's no way I could do the match justice. It's far better for me and for you, for that matter, to just watch the match itself. I think it's near perfect in terms of storytelling and keeping an audience hooked on the edge of your seat the entire time. The one thing there is worth talking about is the scary moment with Taker's dive to the outside. He's supposed to be caught by the cameraman. It's Snuka in disguise. He fails to catch him, and as a result, Taker does suffer a concussion from that fall, which is kind of similar to Brock Lesnar's concussion at 19. Is the best case scenario for a spot like that, having gone as wrong as it did. Snuka did fuck up, but it's one of those things that could happen to anybody. It's one of those just bad luck things, and it being a high profile botch that it was. Snuka would end up being released later that year, and I have a feeling that him dropping Taker like that in such a high profile stage might have had something to do with it. As for the match itself, Taker wins after catching a moonsault and hitting a second tombstone piledriver. 5 stars out of 5. Just watch it. It's that good. On we go to the world title match. Edge defends against John Cena and The Big Show. At No Way Out, Edge lost the WWE title in the first chamber match of the night, but by the end, he took out Kofi Kingston and replaced him in the world title chamber match and unseated John Cena to become the new champ. He and GM Vicky Guerrero, husband and wife, they're on top of the world. Vicky declares that her good friend The Big Show is the new #1 contender for Mania, which Edge is perturbed by, but he ultimately accepts it. Meanwhile, Cena blackmails his way into the title match because he had security footage of Vicky and Big Show kissing. Ooh, a torrid affair. Although it does seem very heelish, the actions of John Cena here, where he blackmails this woman and publicly humiliates these 3 individuals simply in pursuit of a title match at WrestleMania. Yeah? Big Show claims to love Vicky and that Edge doesn't really love her. Slapstick ensues and Vicky gets roughed up and ends up in a wheelchair. Chavo Guerrero's entered the picture as her backup, as we see with him rolling her down the ramp for this match. Show, meanwhile, has beaten both Edge and Cena in singles matches in this build. It's shocking to see Cena lose clean on TV to The Big Show, but it happened. This is the one that has the entrance featuring the army of Cenas as John runs down the ramp for the match. Big Show looks strong in the early going here, able to handle Edge and Cena with relative ease, but he gets dumped out of the ring. Edge kicking the steel steps into his legs, then Cena with a huge ass diving leg drop off the top into the floor. Damn, going hard in the first 5 minutes. Chavo yoinks Cena out of the ring, but he takes an AA on the floor for his troubles. Show gets tied up in the ropes as Cena gets his shit in. Vicky gets up from her wheelchair. It's a miracle! And she gets on the apron. Edge accidentally spears her again. Show's pissed now. The power of love, baby. JR compares Show's hands to hasty bake ovens? What? Cena goes to AA The Big Show, but he gets the big right hand instead. On the outside, Edge jumps off the steps and he and Show crash through the barricade. Back in the ring, Cena counters the spear attempt into the STF. Show is back and pulls Cena off of Edge and out of the ring. We get a brief begrudging alliance between Edge and Cena, but Edge ends it quickly. Cena goes up top, Show pushes him off, and Edge catches him with a spear. Edge on Show's back, they fall into the corner. Cena briefly gets them both on his shoulders for a second. AA to The Big Show, then 1 to Edge on top of Show. Cena pins and wins to regain the world title. What a moment with him and the anti-Cena guy in the front row. I'm going to give this one 4 stars out of 5. I actually went into this match with the lowest of expectations, but I really liked it in the end. I was pleasantly surprised. I thought the match, the pace of it was pretty good, and the big moments that they went with, I thought they all connected, and the finish I thought was pretty rad too. Like, having watched it at the time, I probably would have had a much more negative attitude about it because, oh, lol, Cena wins or whatever, but kind of stepping back with relatively fresh eyes, it makes me appreciate the match a lot more. There's a lot about the storyline going into this that feels kind of weird, like I mentioned, the semi-heelish actions of Cena going into this thing, and the whole storyline basically boiling down to, isn't it crazy that Vicky Guerrero has 2 guys fighting for her love and affection? Whoa, that's crazy! But at least in the end, it did give us this pretty good title match at Mania. Then up next, your main event for the WWE Championship as The Game. Triple H defense against Randy Orton. What a tangled web we have weaved to get here. Okay, first a little bit of background. There was Evolution many years before that. Orton was kicked out, the bad babyface run. Fast forward to early 2009 when Royal Rumble winner Randy Orton begins beating up McMahon family members. First he punts Vince, then he beats up Shane at No Way Out on the following Raw. Then he hits Stephanie with an RKO, and that ignites the rage in the new champion Triple H. Orton claims to be untouchable because he's been diagnosed with IED, which explains all the violent outbursts he's had lately, hides behind lawyers and doctors, until Triple H convinces him to challenge him for the title instead of the World Championship. Like, was that even a possible reality though? Anyway, Triple H is all like, you should avenge for when I embarrassed you in 2004. So now it's on. Orton then says you're not allowed to touch me unless I physically provoke you, and if you break that rule, then the match is off. Then on like the very next SmackDown, that same week, Orton immediately breaks his own rule and beats up Triple H, which makes all the sense in the world. But that of course leads to this infamous segment where Orton and his quote-unquote wife are being interviewed at his quote-unquote home. Then H busts in with a sledgehammer, get that terrible canned scream. Also, who were all these people in Orton's home? They couldn't all be TV crew, could they? But Orton does not press charges because his whole rationale is if Triple H rots in jail, then he won't get his revenge at WrestleMania, so the match is still on. Then on Raw, Orton handcuffs Triple H to the ropes and he DDTs Stephanie, gives her a kiss, declares that it's Orton's law. Then Orton finally admits at the end that he never had IED in the first place. He knew exactly what he was doing the whole time. Okay, so if that's the case and Orton is part of Orton's plan, then why did H have to goad him into challenging him for the championship? You know what? There were a couple of logical pitfalls with this storyline for sure, but I still, when I was watching at the time, I still like got invested in it. I thought, oh, this is actually a really interesting, like personal, gritty grudge storyline. There's history behind it. You got all these personal moments here, beating up the McMahon family members. I was ready to go for this one. You know, I was thinking, wow, I certainly hope the match itself can live up to that level of storytelling that they've been doing in the weeks leading up to this. Oh, but wait, on the Go Home show, they announced that if Triple H is counted out or disqualified, he loses the belt. Well, let's see how that turns out. The match begins. Triple H starts out with many punches. There's a separation, and Orton with the RKO out of nowhere. He goes for a punt, but he misses and takes a pedigree, and we have a double down in the early going. Orton begs off, tells H to wait. H does not wait. Fighting on the outside, Orton throws the champ over the barricade into the crowd. And at this point in the match, I'm looking at the timeline on like Peacock to see how much is left in the show. There's still 15 minutes left, and this match already feels like it's gone 10. Orton working over the H-man for a few minutes, but Triple H comes back with the knees. More back and forth. Triple H with a big old flying nothing, and Orton intercepts him with a drop kick. I mean, that was a picture-perfect flying nothing. What was even his plan there? Orton goes to the punt, but H catches it and flips him out of the ring. The fans do not pop for it in the least, but they milk that spot anyway. Triple H almost gets himself DQ'd, but cooler heads prevail. Going for the pedigree on the announce table, and a very natural place on said table, but Orton hits the backdrop onto the adjacent table. Who'da thunk it? Orton with a draping DDT on the floor. H almost gets counted out, but of course that's not the finish. How are there still 5 minutes left in this match? Orton spams him with stomps. Triple H makes his way back up. Referee Scott Armstrong gets smooshed. RKO to Triple H. Orton goes under the ring and grabs Sledgy, but as he enters the ring, Triple H hits the punt, grabs Sledgy, hits Orton with it while the referee is still down. Everyone looks to the stage to see if someone's going to run down. Nobody does. Triple H rains down with the punches and shows the emotion, but the crowd could not give a shit. The pedigree does get a rise out of them. There's the cover and the win. Triple H retains, and the show's over. I'm going to give this one 2 stars out of 5. This main event was frickin' weak. It was weak in 2009, it's weak in 2022. It goes on for way too long and in no way reflects the vibe they're going for in the build of this thing. This blood feud essentially is what they have. You already neuter it from the get-go by saying there's no DQs and no countouts and everything. They just go out there and have a mostly regular-ass match, you know, except for the last maybe 2 or 3 minutes with Orton grabbing the sledgehammer. Triple H gets his revenge and he retains this belt that there was no risk of him losing, let's be honest, and the crowd was just too tired to care because Shawn and Taker blew them up. So I think if you shaved 10 minutes off this match and like swapped it with Taker Michaels, that alone would have increased the score of this WrestleMania drastically. My grade for WrestleMania 25, the 24th anniversary of WrestleMania, is a B. You know, I was really unfair to this pay-per-view when I did my worst Mania countdown list like 8 years ago, so I just want to apologize for that. It is not belong on that list. I ranked it as one of the worst, and it was basically on the strength of the Divas Battle Royal and the main event. And both were very bad and have only gotten worse with age, folks. They've not gotten better with age. But upon a fresh viewing, I find a lot of this show really fun to watch. Like the ladder match was something I didn't expect. The triple threat for the world title was fun. I really slept on Hardy versus Hardy the first time. Ricky Steamboat, great to see him again. At the end of the day, the show is still mostly remembered for how good Taker Michaels was and how bad the main event was and stuff. But, you know, if you look past those two things, there's still actually a lot of good gems that you can mine from this show. Well, I appreciate you sticking with me as I looked at these WrestleManias through the decades 5, 15, and 25. Certainly running the gamut of emotions and good and bad vibes across all three of those shows. And it really has me ready for WrestleMania 38 in just a couple of weeks in Dallas. The next classic review, it's not coming 2 weeks from now. There is going to be a bit of a lapse in the programming shortly after WrestleMania. But when I do come back with the next classic review, it's going to be of the last, what's considered by many at least, to be the last great WCW pay-per-view before things began to go south. I'm talking about Spring Stampede 1999. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.
I quit!